I never thought I'd be sitting here, telling you this story. My name is Margaret, and I'm 72 years old. I've lived through a lot in my time, raised 3 children, buried my husband, survived cancer twice. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened after my son David died. It was a Tuesday morning in March when the phone rang. You know that feeling when the phone rings at an unusual time and your heart just drops? That was me. David had been in a car accident on his way to work. Gone just like that. My baby boy, my firstborn, the one who used to bring me dandelions from the yard when he was 5 years old, was gone at 38. The funeral was a blur of flowers and casseroles, and people I hadn't seen in years telling me how sorry they were. But through it all, there was Sarah, my daughter-in-law. She'd been married to David for 12 years, and we'd always gotten along well. She was the mother of my 2 precious grandbabies, Emma and little Jake. I thought we'd lean on each other through this terrible time. I thought we'd help each other heal. I was wrong. 3 weeks after we laid David to rest, I was standing in Sarah's kitchen. I'd come over to see the kids, to maybe help with dinner, to be useful somehow. The house felt so empty without David's laughter filling it up. Sarah was at the sink, her back to me, and I was trying to find the right words to ask if I could take Emma and Jake to the park like I used to do every Saturday with David. That's when she turned around. Her face was different, harder than I'd ever seen it. And she looked me straight in the eye and said the words that still echo in my head every single night. "You're all mine now, you bitch." I stood there frozen, thinking I must have misheard her. This was Sarah, who used to hug me at family dinners, who called me Mom instead of Margaret, who cried on my shoulder when she had her miscarriage 2 years ago. But the look in her eyes told me I'd heard exactly right. That moment changed everything. It shattered what was left of my world after losing David. And it started a battle I never saw coming. A battle for my grandchildren, for my place in what was left of my family, and for the truth about who Sarah really was when the cameras stopped rolling and the casseroles stopped coming. What happened next still gives me chills. Because sometimes the people we think we know the best are strangers wearing familiar faces. And sometimes grief reveals who people really are underneath all those smiles and Sunday dinners. Let me tell you about David. David Michael Thompson, named after my father who passed when I was pregnant with him. From the moment that boy took his first breath, he was different. He had this way of looking at you like he could see right into your soul, even as a baby. When David was 7, he found a bird with a broken wing in our backyard. Most kids would have poked at it or run away, but David? He carefully picked it up, brought it inside, and spent 3 weeks nursing that little sparrow back to health. He made a tiny splint out of popsicle sticks and fed it with an eyedropper every 2 hours. When it finally flew away, he cried for an hour. Not because he was sad, but because he was so happy it was free. That was David. He felt everything so deeply. He grew up to be the kind of man who remembered your birthday without Facebook reminding him. The kind who would drive 2 hours in a snowstorm just because you mentioned you were feeling lonely. Every Sunday at exactly 3 o'clock, my phone would ring, and it would be David asking about my week, telling me about his job at the engineering firm, sharing stories about Emma and Jake. When he met Sarah at a coffee shop downtown, she was a teacher at the elementary school. I knew immediately she was special because David's whole face lit up when he talked about her. He'd get this goofy grin and stumble over his words like he was 16 again. Their wedding day was one of the happiest days of my life. Sarah looked beautiful in my grandmother's pearl necklace, and David couldn't stop crying during his vows. For 12 years, we were a family. Sunday dinners at my house, birthday parties, Christmas mornings with wrapping paper everywhere, and David making his famous pancakes. Sarah would help me in the kitchen, and we'd laugh about David's terrible jokes or his obsession with fixing things that weren't broken. She'd roll her eyes when he spent entire weekends organizing his tool shed, and I'd tell her stories about how he used to alphabetize his toy cars as a child. I watched David become the father he'd always dreamed of being. He read to Emma every single night, even when he was exhausted from work. He taught Jake how to throw a baseball in the backyard, patiently picking up the ball over and over when Jake's little arms couldn't quite reach home plate. He was building them a treehouse, had been working on it for months, coming over every weekend with new plans and lumber. The treehouse is still unfinished. Sarah won't let me near it. If you can, please leave in the comments where you're watching this old lady from. It warms my heart to know that my voice is reaching far, maybe even places I never had the chance to visit. And if you like my story, please leave a like and subscribe to Grandparents Archives. It helps us to keep sharing meaningful stories like this. Sarah was the kind of person who made homemade birthday cakes from scratch and remembered exactly how you liked your coffee. She had this warm laugh that filled up a room, and she was incredibly smart, could help Emma with her homework and explain why the sky was blue to Jake in ways that made perfect sense to a 4-year-old mind. When she first started dating David, she'd bring me little gifts, nothing fancy, just a book she thought I'd enjoy or some flowers from her garden. She had green thumbs like you wouldn't believe. Her backyard was something out of a magazine, with roses and herbs and vegetables growing in perfect little rows. She taught me how to grow tomatoes that actually tasted like tomatoes, if you can believe that. But looking back now, there were moments that should have told me something. Like at Emma's 6th birthday party, when my sister Joan complimented Sarah on the decorations. Sarah smiled and said thank you, but I caught her watching Joan afterward, studying her face like she was memorizing it for some reason. Or the time David suggested we all go camping together as a family. Sarah agreed immediately, but later I overheard her on the phone with her friend saying she thought it was a bit much for me to tag along on their family vacation. She had this way of organizing things. Everything had to be just so. The Christmas gifts had to be wrapped in specific colors that matched her theme. The dinner table had to be set exactly 30 minutes before guests arrived. Emma's hair had to be in 2 braids for school pictures, never ponytails. At first, I thought it was sweet how much she cared about making everything perfect for her family. Emma and Jake were my world after David married Sarah. Emma was 8 when David died, smart as a whip, just like her mother, but with David's gentle heart. She'd spend hours at my kitchen table drawing pictures of our family, always making sure to include our old dog Buster, who'd passed away years earlier. Jake was my little shadow. He'd follow me around the garden, asking a million questions about why flowers needed water and where butterflies came from. I picked them up from school every Tuesday and Thursday when Sarah had her teacher meetings. We'd stop for ice cream or go to the library, and I'd listen to their stories about their friends and their teachers and their dreams. Emma wanted to be a veterinarian so she could help animals like her daddy helped that bird. Jake wanted to drive a garbage truck because he thought it was the coolest job in the world. Sarah seemed genuinely grateful for my help with the kids. She'd hug me when I brought them home and tell me she didn't know what they'd do without Grandma Margaret. But sometimes, when she thought I wasn't looking, I'd catch her checking her watch or tapping her fingers on the counter, like she was counting the minutes until I left. I told myself it was just her way. Some people need their space, their routines. Sarah worked hard at school, came home to 2 energetic kids, and had a house to run. Of course she'd be tired sometimes. Of course she'd want her evenings to herself. That Tuesday morning in March started like any other. I was in my kitchen making oatmeal and listening to the morning news when the phone rang at 8:47. I remember the exact time because I was watching the clock, wondering if I had enough time to call David before he got busy at work. It was Sarah's voice, but it sounded wrong. "Hello." She said there had been an accident on Highway 12, that David's car had hit black ice and rolled into a ditch. She said the paramedics did everything they could. She said I needed to come to the hospital right away. I remember dropping the phone. I remember the oatmeal burning on the stove. I remember driving to the hospital in my slippers and pajama top under my coat, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. David was already gone by the time I got there. He looked peaceful, like he was sleeping, but his hands were cold when I held them. I kept thinking he'd open his eyes and make some joke about giving us all a scare. I kept thinking this was a mistake, that someone would come in and tell us there'd been a mix-up at the hospital. Sarah was sitting in the corner of the room, staring at the wall. She hadn't cried yet. The kids were at school, they didn't know. We had to figure out how to tell an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old that their daddy wasn't coming home ever again. The next few days passed in a strange haze. People brought food I couldn't taste. They said words that didn't register. My house filled up with flowers that made me sneeze, and I found myself angry at how alive and colorful they were when David wasn't. At the funeral, Sarah sat between the kids and me in the front pew. Emma kept asking when Daddy was going to wake up, and Jake fell asleep against my shoulder during the service. Sarah held my hand during the eulogy, and I thought we were going to get through this together. But something changed after we buried David. It was small things at first. Sarah stopped answering my calls right away. When I'd ask to see Emma and Jake, she'd say they were busy with school activities or playdates I'd never heard about. She stopped inviting me for Sunday dinner, said the kids needed routine and quiet time. 3 weeks after the funeral, I hadn't seen my grandchildren in 5 days. 5 days might not sound like much, but when you're used to seeing them almost every day, when they're all you have left of your son, 5 days feels like forever. That's when I decided to drive over to their house. I brought Emma's favorite cookies, the ones with chocolate chips that I'd been making for her since she was old enough to eat solid food. I thought maybe we could bake together. Maybe I could hold Jake while he told me about his day at preschool. Sarah answered the door, but she didn't invite me in. She stood in the doorway like a guard, and when I asked about the kids, she said they were napping. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Both of them. I could hear Emma's voice upstairs, calling for her grandmother. I could hear Jake laughing at something on television. But Sarah just stood there, blocking my view into the house that used to feel like a second home. That's when I knew something had changed between us. That's when I knew the Sarah I thought I'd known for 12 years was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. The phone calls became a nightmare. I'd dial Sarah's number and let it ring and ring, knowing she was there because I could see her car in the driveway when I drove by. When she finally did answer, her voice was different, clipped, impatient. She'd say the kids were eating dinner or doing homework or getting ready for bed, always something that made it impossible for me to talk to them. I started calling at different times, thinking maybe I was catching them at bad moments. Morning calls went to voicemail. Afternoon calls were met with excuses about errands and appointments. Evening calls were dismissed because it was too close to bedtime. One Saturday, I drove to Emma's soccer game. I'd been going to her games since she started playing at age 5. I knew the schedule by heart, knew she played right field, and always looked for me in the stands. But when I got there, Sarah's face went cold. She walked over to where I was sitting and said, "Margaret, the kids need space to process their grief without extra pressure." Extra pressure. That's what I'd become. She moved Emma to a different team the next week. Didn't tell me where or when they played. I tried picking up Jake from preschool one Thursday, like I'd done dozens of times before. The teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, looked confused when I arrived. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson, but you're not on Jake's pickup list anymore. Only his mother and the authorized babysitter can collect him." Authorized babysitter. Sarah had hired a 19-year-old college student to watch my grandchildren instead of letting me help. The worst part was hearing Emma's voice through the phone one evening when Sarah thought she'd hung up. Emma was asking, "Why doesn't Grandma Margaret come over anymore? Did we do something wrong?" And Sarah's response made my blood run cold. "Grandma Margaret is very sad right now, sweetheart. Sometimes when grown-ups are sad, they need to stay away from children." She was telling my granddaughter that I was too damaged to be around them, that my grief made me dangerous somehow. I started writing letters to the kids, since I couldn't see them. Little notes telling Emma about the flowers blooming in my garden, telling Jake about the squirrels that had moved into the oak tree in my backyard. I'd leave them in Sarah's mailbox, hoping she'd give them to the children. One day I found them in her trash can, unopened. When I confronted her about it, calling her on a Tuesday evening when I knew the kids would be in bed, she sighed like I was an annoying telemarketer. "Margaret, you have to understand that I'm trying to create stability for Emma and Jake. Your constant hovering isn't helping anyone heal." Hovering. That's what she called my love for my grandchildren. "I just want to see them," I said. "I want to tell them stories about their father. I want to make sure they remember him." They'll remember him just fine without your help, Sarah replied. You need to accept that this family has changed, and your role in it has changed too. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, trying to understand how wanting to love my grandchildren had become something wrong. How being their grandmother had become a problem to be solved instead of a gift to be treasured. Sarah, these children are all I have left of David. Surely you can understand. What I understand, she interrupted, is that you think you have some kind of special claim on them. But I'm their mother, Margaret. I make the decisions about what's best for them. And right now, what's best is some distance from all the emotional chaos. Emotional chaos. That's what she called a grandmother's love. 2 months had passed since I'd properly held my grandchildren. 2 months of excuses and closed doors and phone calls that went nowhere. I was losing weight, couldn't sleep, and found myself talking to David's photo like he might actually answer me back. That Thursday afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I'd been sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a drawing Emma had made me for Mother's Day. A picture of our whole family holding hands under a rainbow. Everyone was smiling, even our old dog Buster. I realized that if Sarah had her way, there would never be another picture like this one. I got in my car and drove to their house. Not to cause trouble, not to make demands, just to see my grandchildren. To hear Jake's laugh, or watch Emma do one of her cartwheels in the front yard. To feel like I was still part of their world. Sarah's car was in the driveway, and I could see the flicker of the television through the living room window. I rang the doorbell and waited, my heart pounding like I was doing something criminal. When Sarah opened the door, her face immediately hardened. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how I was. She just stood there, one hand on the doorframe, blocking my view of the house. Margaret, what are you doing here? I want to see Emma and Jake, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's been 2 months, Sarah. 2 months since I've been able to hold them or talk to them properly. They're my grandchildren. They're my children, she replied, her voice sharp. And they're doing fine without the constant drama. I could hear Emma's voice from somewhere inside the house, asking who was at the door. My heart ached at the sound of it. There's no drama, I said. I just love them. I just want to be their grandmother. Sarah stepped onto the porch and pulled the door closed behind her. Margaret, I'm going to be very clear with you. You're not handling David's death well. You're obsessive, you're intrusive, and frankly, you're making the children uncomfortable. The words hit me like a physical blow. That's not true. Emma and Jake love me. They've always loved spending time with me. Children are polite, Margaret. They don't know how to tell adults when they're being overwhelming. Sarah crossed her arms and looked at me like I was a stranger. You call constantly. You drive by the house. You show up at Jake's school. This behavior isn't normal. I felt something break inside my chest. I'm grieving my son, Sarah. My only son. And now you're taking my grandchildren away from me too. How is that fair? Life isn't fair, she said, and her voice was cold as winter. David is gone. That doesn't give you the right to insert yourself into every aspect of our lives. These children need stability, not a grandmother who breaks down crying every time she sees them. I don't break down crying. You do, Margaret. You absolutely do. Last time you were here, Jake asked me why Grandma was so sad all the time. Do you know what it's like trying to explain to a 4-year-old why the grown-ups in his life can't keep it together? I stood there on her porch, feeling smaller and smaller with every word. But I wasn't going to give up. Not on Emma and Jake. Sarah, please. I know I'm not perfect. I know I'm struggling. But these children are all I have left of David. They need to know their father's family. They need to know where they come from. They know where they come from, Sarah said. They come from me. I'm raising them. I'm the one who gets them ready for school and helps with homework and deals with nightmares about their dead father. You get to sweep in and play fun grandmother when it's convenient for you. That's not what I'm doing. Isn't it? When's the last time you changed a diaper or stayed up all night with a sick child or dealt with a tantrum in the grocery store? You want the fun parts of being a grandmother without any of the actual work of helping me raise these kids. Her words stung because there was a grain of truth in them. I had been the fun grandmother, the one who brought treats and told stories and sent them home to their parents when they got cranky. But that didn't mean I loved them any less. I want to help, I said quietly. I want to be part of their lives in whatever way you'll let me. Sarah studied my face for a long moment, and I thought maybe I'd gotten through to her. Maybe she'd remember the 12 years we'd been family together. Instead, she shook her head. I don't think that's possible anymore, Margaret. I think it's best if you give us some space. A lot of space. How much space? I asked, dreading the answer. I don't know. Maybe by Christmas we can talk about a supervised visit. Christmas was 8 months away. 8 months without my grandchildren. I felt tears starting, and I knew Sarah was watching me prove her point about being too emotional. But I couldn't help it. I was losing everyone I loved, one person at a time. Please don't do this, I whispered. Sarah's expression didn't change. I'm doing what's best for my family, Margaret. I suggest you do the same for yours. She went back inside and closed the door, leaving me standing on the porch like a rejected salesperson. Through the window, I could see Emma running toward the front door, probably hoping to say hello to Grandma Margaret. But Sarah intercepted her, steering her away from the window away from me. I drove home in a fog, realizing that I was fighting a battle I didn't know how to win. Sarah held all the cards. She was their mother, their legal guardian, their whole world. And I was just the grandmother who cried too much and wanted too much and reminded everyone of the son who wasn't coming home. 3 weeks later, I couldn't take it anymore. Emma's 9th birthday was coming up in 2 days, and I hadn't even been told about the party. I found out from my neighbor Mrs. Chun, whose daughter was in Emma's class, that there was going to be a celebration at the park on Saturday afternoon. My granddaughter's birthday party, and I wasn't invited. I spent Friday night wrapping the art set I'd bought for Emma, the one with 72 colored pencils and sketch pads that she'd been admiring at the store for months. I wrote her a card telling her how proud her daddy would be of the kind, creative girl she was becoming. Then I drove to Sarah's house, determined to at least drop off the gift. The front door was open, and I could hear voices from the kitchen. Sarah was on the phone with someone, and her voice carried through the screen door. No, she's not coming to the party, Sarah was saying. I can't deal with Margaret's waterworks every time someone mentions David. Emma deserves a happy birthday, not some grief fest with her grandmother sobbing into the cake. I stood there holding Emma's gift, listening to Sarah describe me like I was some kind of burden, some embarrassing relative who couldn't be trusted around children. She keeps showing up here uninvited, Sarah continued. Yesterday she was parked across the street, just sitting in her car, watching the house. It's getting weird, honestly. I had been parked across the street. I'd hoped to catch a glimpse of the kids playing in the yard, just to see them for a few minutes. I didn't know Sarah had noticed. I think she's having some kind of breakdown, Sarah said to whoever was on the other end of the line. David was always her favorite, and now she's trying to replace him with Emma and Jake. It's not healthy for any of us. Something inside me snapped. I walked up to the screen door and knocked hard enough to rattle the frame. Sarah spun around, her face going pale when she saw me standing there. I have to go, she said quickly into the phone and hung up. Margaret, what are you doing here? I came to bring Emma her birthday present, I said, holding up the wrapped package. Since apparently I'm not welcome at her party. Sarah's jaw tightened. You weren't invited because I knew you'd make it about David. Everything with you is about David. He was my son, Sarah. He was Emma and Jake's father. Of course he's part of every birthday and holiday and important moment. That's how families work. No, that's how your family worked, Sarah said, stepping closer to the screen door but not opening it. This is my family now. I'm the one making the decisions. Emma and Jake are my family too. You can't just erase me from their lives because it's convenient for you. Sarah's eyes flashed with something I'd never seen before, pure anger. Convenient? You think any of this is convenient for me? You think it's convenient being a single mother to 2 heartbroken children while their grandmother stalks us and makes everything harder. I'm not stalking you. I'm trying to maintain a relationship with my grandchildren. By sitting outside my house. By calling the school to check on them. By interrogating their friends' mothers about playdates. Sarah's voice was getting louder. Yes, Margaret, I know about all of it. This town isn't that big. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment, but I wasn't backing down. I wouldn't have to do any of that if you'd just let me see them normally. There is no normal anymore. Sarah shouted, and I could see tears starting in her eyes. David is dead, Margaret. He's dead and he's never coming back, and I have to figure out how to raise his children without him. I don't have time to manage your feelings too. I'm not asking you to manage my feelings. I'm asking you to let me love my grandchildren. Sarah laughed, but it was a bitter sound. Love them? You want to love them the way you loved David? By making them the center of your universe? By expecting them to fill the hole he left behind? Her words hit me like a slap. That's not what I'm doing. Isn't it? You call Emma your little angel and Jake your sweet boy, just like you used to talk about David. You want them to be your whole world because you can't accept that your world ended when David died. I stared at her through the screen door, seeing a stranger wearing Sarah's face. My world didn't end, but it got a lot smaller. Those children are all I have left of my son. They're not pieces of David for you to collect, Sarah said, her voice getting dangerous. They're my children. They're individual people with their own lives and their own needs, and right now they need stability more than they need a grandmother who can't let go. I'm not trying to replace David with them. Yes, you are. Sarah yanked open the screen door so hard it slammed against the house. You want them to love you the way David loved you. You want them to call you every Sunday and visit every weekend and make you feel like you're still somebody's mother. But David was your son, Margaret. Emma and Jake are mine. I stepped back, shocked by the fury in her voice. Sarah, what's wrong with you? We used to be close. We used to care about each other. That was before, she said, and her voice dropped to something cold and final. That was when David was alive to mediate between us. Now it's just you and me, and I see exactly who you really are. Who am I, Sarah? Tell me who you think I am. She looked me straight in the eye, and I saw something that made my blood freeze. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was hatred. You're a lonely old woman who thinks being David's mother gives you some kind of ownership over his family. You think because you raised him, you have a right to his children. You think because you're grieving, everyone else has to accommodate your needs. That's not true. You're selfish, Margaret. You've always been selfish. David used to tell me how you'd guilt trip him if he missed a Sunday phone call. How you'd cry if he couldn't come for dinner. How you made everything about what you needed from him. The words felt like physical blows. David never said those things. David loved you, so he protected you from the truth. But I don't love you, Margaret. I don't owe you anything. And I'm done pretending that your feelings matter more than my children's well-being. I stood there holding Emma's birthday present, trying to process what Sarah was telling me. That my relationship with David had been unhealthy. That I'd been demanding and manipulative without knowing it. That everything I thought I knew about our family had been wrong. I just want to see them, I whispered. Sarah's face twisted into something ugly. Well, you can't. They're mine now, Margaret. My children, my family, my decisions. David is gone, and you don't get to use these kids to keep him alive. They're his children too. No! Sarah screamed, and I saw neighbors starting to look out their windows. They're not his anymore because he's dead. He's dead, Margaret, and he left me to deal with everything, including you. She stepped out onto the porch, getting close enough that I could see the veins standing out in her neck. You want to know the truth? I'm glad you can't see them. I'm glad I don't have to watch you turn them into little versions of David, hanging on your every word and thinking you're perfect. They're better off without your guilt trips and your neediness and your constant reminders of their dead father. I felt tears starting, but Sarah wasn't finished. You know what David told me right before he died? He said he was worried about you. He said you were getting too attached to the kids, too dependent on all of us. He said he didn't know what you'd do if something happened to him. The words cut deeper than anything else she'd said. That's not true. It is true. He was planning to talk to you about getting a hobby, making some friends, building a life that didn't revolve around us. But he ran out of time, didn't he? I was crying openly now, and Sarah watched me with something that looked like satisfaction. So here's what's going to happen, she said, her voice deadly calm. You're going to stop calling. You're going to stop driving by. You're going to stop asking about the kids at school and at the grocery store and everywhere else in this town. You're going to leave us alone. Sarah, please. Because if you don't, she continued, stepping even closer, I'll get a restraining order. I'll tell the judge about the phone calls and the drive-bys and the presents you leave in the mailbox. I'll tell them you're harassing a grieving widow and her children. And then you'll never see Emma and Jake again. I stared at her, this woman who used to hug me at family dinners, who used to ask my advice about the kids, who used to call me Mom instead of Margaret. They're all I have left, I said quietly. Sarah's smile was the cruelest thing I'd ever seen. She leaned in close, so close I could smell her shampoo, and spoke in a voice that was barely above a whisper. Well, guess what, Margaret? You're all mine now, you bitch. The words hung in the air between us like poison. I felt my knees go weak, felt the world tilt sideways. This wasn't grief talking anymore. This wasn't stress or exhaustion or the strain of single motherhood. This was pure hatred, and it was directed at me. Sarah straightened up, smoothed down her hair, and stepped back toward her front door like nothing had happened. Now get off my property, she said in a normal tone of voice. And don't come back. She went inside and locked the door, leaving me standing on her porch with Emma's unwrapped birthday present in my hands and the echo of her words ringing in my ears. You're all mine now, you bitch. I walked back to my car on unsteady legs, wondering who this woman was and what she'd done with the Sarah I thought I knew. Wondering if David had really said those things about me, or if Sarah was just trying to hurt me in the deepest way possible. But mostly wondering how I was going to survive losing my grandchildren on top of losing my son, and why the person who should have understood my grief better than anyone was the one determined to make it worse. I didn't leave my house for 3 days after that confrontation. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't stop hearing Sarah's voice saying those words over and over. You're all mine now, you bitch. The hatred in her eyes when she said it haunted me. On the 4th day, my sister Joan came by with groceries and found me still in my pajamas at 2 in the afternoon. She made me shower, made me eat soup, and then sat me down at the kitchen table like I was a child. Margaret, you can't go on like this, she said. You're disappearing. I told her everything about Sarah's behavior, about being cut off from the kids, about the terrible things she'd said on the porch. Joan listened without interrupting, but I could see the concern growing in her eyes. There has to be more to this story, Joan said finally. The Sarah I met at family dinners wasn't capable of that kind of cruelty. Something else is going on. What if there isn't? I asked. What if this is just who she really is and David's death gave her permission to show it? Joan shook her head. People don't change that completely overnight. There's something you're missing. The next morning, I remembered that David had asked me to water Sarah's garden while they were on vacation last summer. She'd given me a spare key, and as far as I knew, she'd never asked for it back. It was probably wrong, maybe even illegal, but I couldn't stop thinking about what Joan had said. There had to be more to this story. I waited until Thursday afternoon when I knew Sarah would be at work and the kids would be at school. My hands were shaking as I unlocked her back door and stepped into the kitchen where she'd said those horrible words to me. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Evidence that she'd always hated me? Proof that she was planning to move away with the kids? I felt like a criminal going through someone else's house, but I was desperate to understand how our relationship had fallen apart so completely. In David's old office, I found stacks of bills on the desk, medical bills from his accident, mortgage statements, credit card bills with balances that made my stomach drop. The numbers were overwhelming. I had no idea Sarah was struggling financially on top of everything else. But it was the notebook I found in the desk drawer that really broke my heart. It wasn't a diary exactly, more like scattered thoughts and lists written in Sarah's handwriting. Some pages were dated, others weren't. Some were covered in tear stains that had dried and left the ink smudged. The first entry I read was from 2 weeks after David's funeral. Emma asked why Grandma Margaret cries every time she looks at her. I don't know what to tell her. I don't know how to explain that sometimes love looks like sadness. Margaret sees David in Emma's eyes, in Jake's laugh, and it breaks her every time. But it breaks the kids too, watching their grandmother fall apart. How do I protect them from her grief when I can barely handle my own? I kept reading, my heart pounding. Margaret called 6 times today. I know she just wants to help, but I can't handle her questions about how I'm doing, if I'm eating enough, if the kids are okay. I'm not okay. The kids aren't okay. But pretending we're fine for her is exhausting on top of everything else. I need to grieve without performing recovery for David's mother. Further down the page, she brought dinner again, stood in my kitchen and rearranged my cabinets while telling me stories about David as a little boy. I know she means well, but I can't listen to one more story about how special he was. I know he was special. He was my husband. But right now I need to figure out how to be a single mother, not listen to his mother worship his memory. I turned the page feeling sick. Margaret showed up at Jake's school today to check on him. The teacher called me at work, confused about who was authorized to visit. I had to leave a parent conference to deal with it. Margaret looked hurt when I explained she needed permission, but she doesn't understand. I can't have her making decisions about my children without talking to me first. I'm their mother. I'm the one who has to live with the consequences. Another entry, this one dated just a week before our confrontation. I dreamed about David last night. He was telling me I'm not doing enough to include his mother. He said Emma and Jake need their grandmother, that I shouldn't let my own issues get in the way. But in the dream, Margaret was standing behind him, and she looked exactly like him. Same eyes, same smile, same way of tilting their head when they're disappointed in me. I woke up feeling like I was failing both of them. The last entry I read was dated the day after our fight. I said terrible things to Margaret today. Things I can't take back. I called her names and told her she was selfish and made her cry on my front porch like she was a stranger. The truth is, I'm jealous of her. I'm jealous that she had 38 years with David, and I only got 12. I'm jealous that he called her every Sunday without me reminding him. I'm jealous that she knew him as a little boy, that she taught him how to tie his shoes and ride a bike, and all the things I'll never get to teach him. She gets to be the mother who raised the man I loved. I only get to be the widow he left behind. I know David would be ashamed of how I've treated his mother. He loved her so much, worried about her constantly, always said she was too generous for her own good. He made me promise at our wedding that I'd take care of her if anything happened to him. I promised, and now I've broken that promise in the worst possible way. But I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to share my children with someone when I'm barely holding on myself. I don't know how to be strong enough for everyone when most days I can barely get out of bed. Margaret thinks I hate her, but the truth is I hate myself. I hate that I couldn't save David. I hate that I can't be the mother he would want me to be. I hate that I'm failing his children and his mother and his memory all at the same time. Maybe it's better if she stays away. Maybe Emma and Jake are better off without a grandmother who reminds them of their dead father and a mother who can't figure out how to help them heal. I closed the notebook and sat in David's old chair, crying for the first time since the funeral. Not just for David, but for Sarah too. For the impossible situation we were both trying to navigate without any roadmap. For the children caught between two women who loved them, but couldn't figure out how to love them together. I thought about all the times I'd shown up unannounced, all the phone calls and questions and offers of help that Sarah had experienced as pressure. I thought about how my grief must have looked to someone trying to hold a family together on her own. I thought about how lonely and overwhelmed she must have felt, and how my constant presence might have felt like judgment instead of support. Sarah wasn't a monster. She was a terrified widow trying to protect her children from more loss, even if that loss was me. And I had been so focused on my own pain that I couldn't see hers. But knowing why she'd pushed me away didn't make it hurt less. And it didn't change the fact that Emma and Jake were growing up without their grandmother, without stories about their father's childhood, without the connection to his family that I desperately wanted to give them. The question was, could we find a way back to each other before it was too late? Or had we both said and done things that couldn't be forgiven? I put the notebook back exactly where I found it and left through the back door, my mind racing. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about what Sarah had taken from me. I was thinking about what I might have taken from her without realizing it. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote Sarah a letter. Not a long one. I'd learned that my words could feel overwhelming to her. Just a few sentences saying I was sorry for showing up unannounced so many times, and that I'd found some of David's old tools in my garage that I thought she might need for household repairs. I left the letter in her mailbox Saturday morning, along with David's toolbox. I didn't expect a response. But Tuesday evening my phone rang. Sarah's number. Margaret. Her voice sounded different. Tired but not angry. Yes. Thank you for the tools. And for the letter. A long pause. Can we talk? Not on the phone. In person. We met at the park where David used to take Emma and Jake to feed the ducks. Sarah was already sitting on a bench when I arrived, staring out at the pond. She looked smaller somehow, like she'd been carrying something heavy and had finally set it down. I sat beside her, leaving space between us. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. I read what you wrote in the notebook, I said finally. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have gone into your house, but I'm not sorry I read it. Sarah didn't look surprised. I wondered if you might. David always said you were too curious for your own good. She almost smiled when she said it. I didn't know about the bills. About how hard things have been financially. David had a small life insurance policy, but it barely covered the funeral. Sarah picked at a loose thread on her jacket. I've been working extra hours trying to keep up with the mortgage. The kids don't know how bad it is. We sat in silence again, watching a family of ducks paddle around the pond. I was jealous of you, Sarah said suddenly. Is that awful? My husband dies and I'm jealous of his mother. What were you jealous of? Everything. The way he lit up when you called. The way he'd drop everything if you needed help. The way he talked about his childhood like it was perfect. Sarah's voice got quieter. I used to wonder if he loved you more than he loved me. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. Sarah, that's not David worshipped you. You and the kids were his whole world. I know that now. But when you're grieving, logic doesn't work the same way. She turned to look at me for the first time. I was also jealous that you got to fall apart. You got to cry and be sad and have people bring you food and check on you. I had to keep functioning because Emma and Jake needed me to. I thought about all the times I'd shown up at her door, expecting her to comfort me or listen to my stories about David, never considering that she might need someone to take care of her. I made everything harder for you, I said. You made some things harder, but you also made some things easier. Emma still talks about the stories you used to tell her about David as a little boy. Jake asks when Grandma Margaret is coming back. Sarah wiped her eyes with her sleeve. I took that away from them because I couldn't handle my own feelings. I took it away too. I was so desperate to keep David alive through them that I forgot they were your children first. We sat there crying together for the first time since David's funeral. Not the polite, contained crying of the memorial service, but the ugly, honest crying of two women who'd lost the same person in different ways. I don't know how to fix this, Sarah said eventually. Maybe we don't fix it. Maybe we just try to do better going forward. Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Emma's birthday party is this Saturday. The one at the park. Would you like to come? I felt my heart jump, but I tried to keep my voice steady. Are you sure? No, but I think David would want you there. And I think Emma would too. What about Jake? Sarah actually smiled. Jake asked me yesterday if you were mad at him. He thought he'd done something wrong, and that's why you stopped coming around. The thought of Jake blaming himself made me want to cry all over again. There would have to be rules, Sarah said. Boundaries. I need to know you'll respect that I'm their mother. Of course. And if you're having a bad day, if seeing them makes you too sad, you need to tell me instead of staying and making everyone uncomfortable. I nodded. I can do that. And no more showing up unannounced. No more calling the school or asking their friends' parents about them. If you want to know how they're doing, you ask me. Okay. Sarah studied my face like she was trying to decide if she could trust me. This isn't going to be easy. We're both still figuring out how to live without him. I know. And I can't promise it'll work. If it gets too hard, if it's not good for Emma and Jake, I might have to pull back again. I understand. She stood up from the bench, and I thought she was leaving, but instead she turned to face me. Margaret, I'm sorry for what I said on my porch. About David, about you being selfish. I was angry and hurting, and I wanted to hurt you back. But you didn't deserve that. I'm sorry too. For all of it. Sarah held out her hand, and I shook it like we were making a business deal instead of trying to rebuild a family. Emma's party starts at 2 on Saturday, she said. Bring the art set. She's been wanting to try watercolors. As she walked away, I sat on the bench for another hour, watching the ducks and thinking about second chances. It wasn't perfect. We weren't magically okay. But for the first time in months, I felt like I might see my grandchildren again. And maybe, eventually, we could figure out how to be a family without David there to hold us together. That Saturday afternoon at Emma's birthday party changed everything, but not in the way you might expect. It wasn't some magical moment where we all hugged and pretended the past few months hadn't happened. Emma was shy with me at first, staying close to her mother, watching me like she wasn't sure who I was anymore. Jake hid behind Sarah's legs when I tried to say hello. I realized then how much damage we'd done with our fighting. These children had lost their father, and then they'd lost their grandmother too, and they didn't understand why. But when Emma opened the art set and saw those 72 colored pencils, her face lit up the same way David's used to when he got excited about something. She spent the rest of the party drawing pictures of butterflies and houses and stick figures that she said were our family. She drew David too, standing in the clouds with angel wings. Daddy's watching the party from heaven, she told me, holding up her drawing. He probably wishes he could have some cake. I cried then, but not the overwhelming tears that had scared the children before. These were different tears, sad but not desperate, missing David but grateful to be there with his daughter. Sarah and I didn't talk much that day. We were both focused on the kids, on making Emma's birthday special, on acting normal even though nothing felt normal yet. But when I was leaving, Sarah walked me to my car. Thank you for coming, she said. And thank you for not making it about David. I realized she was right. For the first time since he died, I'd spent time with Emma and Jake without constantly bringing up their father or telling stories about when he was little. I'd just been their grandmother, present in that moment, focused on them instead of my memories. Over the next few months, we took baby steps. I'd see the kids every other Saturday for a few hours. Sometimes at Sarah's house, sometimes at the park, sometimes at my place for baking lessons with Emma or puzzle time with Jake. Sarah always set the schedule, always decided what worked for her family, and I learned to be grateful for whatever time I got instead of asking for more. There were setbacks. Days when seeing the children made my grief so sharp I had to excuse myself to cry in the bathroom. Days when Sarah got overwhelmed and canceled our plans. Days when Emma asked why Daddy couldn't come back, and neither Sarah nor I had a good answer. But there were good days too. Jake started calling me Grandma again instead of Mrs. Margaret. Emma asked if I could teach her to grow tomatoes like her daddy used to help me with. Sarah began texting me pictures of the kids doing silly things, the way she used to before David died. We were building something new. Not the easy relationship we'd had when David was alive to smooth over any rough edges, but something more honest. Something that acknowledged we were two different people who loved the same children and missed the same man. I learned that grief doesn't have to destroy families, but it can if you let it. I learned that love sometimes means stepping back when someone needs space, even when every part of you wants to hold on tighter. I learned that being right isn't as important as being kind, and that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones hurting the most themselves. Most importantly, I learned that families can survive almost anything if everyone is willing to admit their mistakes and try to do better. Sarah and I will never be best friends. We're too different for that, and we've hurt each other too deeply. But we're family, and that means something. It means showing up for Emma's school plays and Jake's soccer games. It means splitting holidays and sharing memories and putting the children's needs ahead of our own feelings. It means David's children get to grow up knowing both sides of their family, even though their father isn't here to make sure we all get along. 6 months after that first birthday party, Sarah called me on a Tuesday evening. Emma had been asking questions about what David was like when he was her age, and Sarah wondered if I'd like to come over and look through old photo albums with her. We sat at Sarah's kitchen table, the same kitchen where she'd said those terrible words to me, and told Emma stories about her father as a little boy. How he used to catch fireflies in mason jars. How he learned to ride a bike by crashing into Mrs. Peterson's rose bushes. How he once tried to give me a haircut with scissors from the kitchen drawer. Emma laughed at every story, and I realized this was what David would have wanted. Not for Sarah and me to pretend we were perfect, but for us to work together to keep his memory alive for his children. After Emma went to bed, Sarah made us both a cup of tea, and we sat in comfortable silence for the first time in over a year. "I think David would be proud of us," she said finally. "For not killing each other?" Sarah almost smiled. "For figuring out how to love his kids together, even when we couldn't figure out how to love each other." She was right. This wasn't about Sarah and me becoming friends again. This was about Emma and Jake having the family they deserved, even if that family looked different than it used to. And that was enough. It had to be enough. Today, Emma is 10 and Jake is 6. Emma still draws pictures of our family, but now they include Sarah's new boyfriend Mark, who's been patient and kind with all of us. Jake plays Little League Baseball, and I sit in the stands next to Sarah, cheering just as loudly as she does when he actually connects with the ball. We still have hard days. Birthdays and holidays when David's absence feels like a physical ache. Days when Emma cries because she can't remember what her father's voice sounded like. Days when Jake asks why other kids have daddies and he doesn't. But we get through them together now. Sarah doesn't try to handle everything alone anymore, and I don't try to fix things I can't fix. We just show up for each other and for the children, and somehow that's been enough. Last month, Sarah asked if I wanted to help Emma and Jake plant a memorial garden in their backyard, in the spot where David was building that treehouse he never finished. We planted his favorite flowers, sunflowers and marigolds, and the climbing roses he'd been planning to train up the oak tree. As we worked in the dirt together, Jake asked if the flowers would help Daddy know we still think about him. Before I could answer, Emma said, "Daddy doesn't need flowers to know that, silly. He knows because we love each other." Out of the mouths of babes. If you're listening to this story and thinking about someone in your own family, someone you've lost touch with, someone you had a fight with, someone you've been meaning to call, maybe this is your sign to reach out. Not because everything will magically be perfect, but because families are messy and complicated and worth fighting for. Maybe you have a Sarah in your life, someone whose grief looks different from yours, someone whose way of coping doesn't make sense to you. Maybe you have a Margaret, someone who loves too hard, who wants too much, who doesn't know when to step back. Maybe you're both of those people, depending on the day. The truth is, we're all just doing our best with the broken hearts and complicated feelings we've been given. We're all trying to love people who sometimes hurt us, and we're all trying to be loved by people we sometimes hurt in return. But here's what I learned from Sarah, from Emma and Jake, from my own mistakes. It's never too late to try again. It's never too late to say you're sorry. It's never too late to choose love over being right. David used to say that family isn't just about blood or marriage certificates. It's about the people who show up when life gets hard, who stick around when you're not your best self, who choose to keep loving you even when love is difficult. Sarah and I chose each other, over and over again, even when it would have been easier to walk away. We chose Emma and Jake. We chose to honor David's memory by building something good from something broken. And every Sunday at 3 o'clock, when my phone used to ring with David's call, I think about how proud he'd be of the family we've managed to hold together in his absence. If this story touched something in you, I'd love to hear about it. Tell me about your own family, your own second chances, your own complicated love stories. Because that's what we're all living, isn't it? Complicated love stories that don't always have happy endings, but are worth telling anyway. And maybe, just maybe, by sharing our stories with each other, we can learn how to love a little better, forgive a little easier, and hold on to each other a little tighter while we can. I'm so grateful you've listened to my story this far. It's not always easy revisiting these memories, but knowing that sharing them might help someone else find their way makes it completely worthwhile. I truly hope that what I've shared today isn't just a sad tale, but also a source of motivation. It's a reminder that no matter how difficult life becomes, there's always light at the end of the road. Always remember that strength lies within you, and hope is a flame that should never be put out. To help us keep spreading these meaningful stories, please support the Grandparents Archives channel by subscribing, liking this video, and sharing it with your loved ones. I want to sincerely thank the founder of Grandparents Archives for giving me this opportunity to share my experience. Stay tuned for more touching stories on Grandparents Archives, and thank you all.